I just want to welcome everybody to the library here on this beautiful sunny Tuesday. My name is Lauren Gramley. I am the business specialist here at the library. Really excited to have you here this evening for Grant Writing Basics. I don't know if you guys are aware, but here at the library we have a lot of great resources. You can do a book of library with me, the business specialist, if you want to meet about marketing, about grants, about how to start a business, fundraising, anything nonprofit or business related. We have a lot of great resources here, databases, and I actually will talk a little bit about that tonight on the end of the presentation. But obviously the best thing about the programming we have here at the library is doing these amazing workshops with local experts, like tonight's presenter. So I'm going to go ahead and introduce Anne. So since July of 2016, Anne Craig has had the privilege of serving as a senior director at CARLI, which is the Consortium of Academic and Research Libraries in Illinois, a unit of the System Offices of the University of Illinois. CARLI counts 128 academic and research libraries as its members. In September 2021, the University of Illinois System and CARLI was awarded a 3-year, $2 million grant from the U.S. Department of Education's Open Textbooks Pilot Program, a program that will provide access to open textbooks and personalized learning tools for entry-level courses in high-demand healthcare and human development career paths. Prior to July 2016, Anne was the director of the Illinois State Library for 11 years under Secretary of State Jesse White, holding various roles at the ISL since 1989. So I'd like to welcome up to the stage Anne Craig.
Thanks so much, Lauren. Really appreciate it, and I really appreciate being here tonight. I'm a bit of a wanderer when I present, so I'll be around on the stage. I'd like to encourage you during this presentation to ask questions. That's the way you get the most out of it, okay? This is nothing that you need to, oh, maybe I shouldn't ask. Ask! I want to know what you're thinking, okay? All right, let's see if I can get this to work here. Ah, it worked. All right, so tonight we are going to cover these topics, and then I'm going to turn it over to Lauren so she can review with you some of the fabulous resources that are here at the Champaign Public Library. So we'll start with how do you get started, finding opportunities for grants, best practices in writing, 4 of the most common application pieces or components, the funder's point of view, what to do if your application is funded and what to do if it's not funded, the most common missteps in grant writing, and a list of resources that will help you. And these slides are available to you, okay? All right, why am I here? Well, I have written, actually I've written grants since this. I should update this a little bit, but I write a lot of work, grants in my work. I'm also, I am an instructor for the University of Illinois iSchool, and I teach grant writing for libraries. We're not going to talk about libraries, we're just going to talk about general grant writing basics. My course is 8 weeks long, so you're getting an hour, 45 minutes tonight. We're skimming over the top, okay? And before I was here, I was at the State Library, and the State Library here in Illinois awards $30–40 million in grants every year to public and school libraries. So not only have I been on the grant writing side of the coin, but on the other side of the coin where I've been a grant officer, if that makes sense. Okay. Couple of words I'm going to use tonight are NOFO and GPO. NOFO stands for Notice of Funding Opportunity. That's just the thing that comes out that says, hey, here's a grant, apply for me. And a GPO is a grant program officer at the agency or the organization that's in charge of the grant program that you are applying for. All right, let's get started. So when I think about writing grants, I think about, what do I see as a need in my community? You know, if I could wave a magic wand, what would I change? What do I see every day? What do I feel passionate about? What is it that makes me feel really frustrated and angry? Like, oh, why doesn't somebody do something about this? And the other side of that, what has brought me joy? You know, is there something that with a grant I could extend to the people I serve? These are all questions that you ask yourself when you're getting started with a grant. What is it that is at my core about this thing that I want to do? It all boils down to, in the end, this. And I will use this term repeatedly. Target audience. That's the people you're trying to reach with your grant. Maybe it's your employees. Maybe it's a group of people in the public. Maybe it's people you don't even know. Your target audience is the audience that will be the recipient of the services and programs that your grant is applying for. Why do we apply for grants? Why should you know how to write grants? Well, in any business or organization, grants give you capacity you would not have any other way. And guess what? You get to meet people in the community you never would have met any other way. You build bridges, you form alliances, and you get to build a skill that you can take with you to other jobs. And what I've liked about it is I have really engaged in my profession in terms of getting to know people like Lauren because of the work I've done in this area. So when you're thinking about writing a grant and you've got that great grant application, that NOFO pulled up on the screen, here's something I want you to think about. You talk to the people you work for, you report to. Maybe that's yourself, maybe that's a board, maybe that's some sort of commission. But you talk to them and you say, hey, I want to apply for this grant. You want to do that in advance because you want them to be a cheerleader for your project. Believe me, if you get a grant, you want the whole organization to take part in it, to be behind you, to feel like, wow, this is a win for all of us. And you want to paint a picture of how this grant is going to do XYZ for your organization, for your employees, for your target audience, whoever. And very clearly describe what's the thing you're trying to change and how is it going to look differently. How is it going to look different once you have the project in hand? All right, let's talk a little bit about where to find opportunities. And grants are changing daily in this country.
Yeah.
So you know that already, but there are opportunities for grants out there. And there are, believe it or not, guys, there are a lot of private organizations that give grants. Ben & Jerry's, Target, Walmart, they all have grant-giving arms. There might even be grants from your own organizations. There are grants, well, I can't say this anymore. There used to be a lot of grants in the world that went unapplied for, but there are grants out there in many different places, in many different ways that maybe you never even thought of. So Lauren's going to help you with that a little bit. And also, don't forget to look at agency websites and newsletters, kind of poke around and see who does offer grants. This Philanthropy Today provides a free email that gives you sort of what's going on in the grant giving world. It's a really quick read, and I strongly recommend it if subscribing to it, I should say, if something you want to do is start getting into grants. I provided a resource list at the end of this slide deck to help. All right, so here's the big kahuna. Yes, yes.
Question over here.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
No, you're doing it.
You know, this light, I'm
No,
so sorry.
you're fine. I feel like this might be a dumb question. But
No,
I
no
know
dumb
like some
questions.
college campuses will offer like a maybe a database or something.
Okay.
Sort of a list. Does the state of Illinois offer anything like that where there might be like a list through the state of Illinois, particular grants, or is this something?
There's not an omnibus list. There's not a list. The best places to look are DCEO, the Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunity, their website here in Illinois. That's probably the best place to try to find state of Illinois government grants.
Okay.
But other agencies will have grants available. So, you know, if I was interested in a transportation grant, I'd go and look at the IDOT site, Illinois Department of Transportation, and see if they offer grants. You know, kind of think through what is it I'm interested in doing, and then go and look at those agency sites. But in Illinois, DCEO is the big kahuna.
Okay. Thank you very much.
The big kahuna in the federal government is this site called grants.gov. It is the clearinghouse of all the federal grants. So, you know, me, librarian lady, my keyword, you probably can't see this, but my keyword over here is library, and it brings up all kinds of library-related grants that are available, all right? So if you're looking for a federal grant, go to this site and start putting keywords in and see what comes up. See if any of these come up. You have to really look through them to see if they're what you want, but there were a lot. I'm not sure what, you know, the world has changed here. Okay, let's talk a little bit about writing best practices. All right, as a former grant program officer, person who was in the grant giving world, this is my advice to you, okay? Follow the instructions precisely, okay? The people who have written that NOFO, that application, they want to see all the applications that come in following exactly the same way that they're put together. Why? So that they can compare apples to apples, you know, so that all the grants look the same. The content is different, but all the pieces are the same. So it's really important that you follow the instructions, and if you don't understand something, ask the GPO. They are there, the grant program officer is there to help you, and to help you be a successful applicant. They want the grants that they give to be amazing. They want them to be so successful that they're in the news, you know? This is what they want. They want people to write great grants. So if you don't understand something, ask, email them, ask. And respond to what they've put in the NOFO, point by point. If it asks you for identify the need, describe your target audience, and then what are the results, you're going to put in paragraphs in exactly that order. Because what's happening is the grant reviewers, the people who score your application, are going through that application point by point and looking for the things that are in the NOFO. So you don't want to make them hunt. You want to make them see things very clearly in the order that they're presented. And you want to look at the funder's website. Many grant-giving organizations, both public and private, give examples of great applications right on their websites. Look at the application. Is there something there that, oh, wow, I could adapt that for my own use? Am I missing questions? Okay, all right. Here's some real-world examples, just in case you think I'm exaggerating. So, this agency, the Institute of Museum and Library Services, this is a federal agency. In their grant, in their NOFO, they say that if you exceed the page limit, what are they not going to do? What are they not going to do? They don't send it to the reviewers. So if the limit is 2 pages and you submit 3, guess what? Your last page with all the conclusions and the good stuff, the reviewers never see. And here, this NOFO is telling you exactly how to name files. They also, in this NOFO, told me what font to use, what size font to use, what margins to use. I mean, you go through the NOFO and you say, I'm going to follow this point by point, and I'm going to do everything they say. I don't want to get my grant application thrown out for something like not following the instructions, right? Right? Okay. And you be careful of the verbs you use. Rather than saying, gee, we hope participants will learn something, you're going to say 5 sessions will require participants to use their new computer skills. And there is this great little tool that's called Bloom's Taxonomy of Measurable Verbs. And this basically gives you power verbs in different powers. So I always look at Bloom's when I'm writing. Okay, so bottom line, you want to paint a picture for your reviewers. You want to really talk about how here's the problem, here's the need, and the solution is, dun dun dun, my grant. This is what you want to do. You want to paint a picture in the minds of the reviewers. Your application is a contest. You're in a contest with other applications. Many of these calls for applications, these grant programs, many of them are extremely competitive, and you want to get that funded, right? You want to be funded. So you want to be sure that your application is going to stand out in the minds of the reviewers. Okay, let's talk about 4 common application components. Now, there are lots of different NOFOs. Some of the NOFOs from private foundations are very, very simple. They don't have a lot of components. But typically, if you're applying for anything from the state or federal government, there are going to be a bunch of different pieces that you have to put together in order to assemble your application package. And guess what? They'll kick your application out if you don't have all the pieces that you're supposed to have. So we're going to talk about these 4 components: the narrative, the budget, evaluations, timeline, and just a little bit of, tips on each of these. You want to read that NOFO really carefully to be sure you're not including something you shouldn't include. For example, certain NOFOs don't want you to include bids or letters of support, that kind of thing. All right, let's talk about the narrative. This is the heart of your application. This is the thing that you really want the reviewers to remember, to think about. Oh, that application for that one project, oh, that was so amazing. I really want to be sure I give that a great score. So you want to focus on the target audience, whoever it is you're trying to reach with this grant, whether it's your business or your customers or your community. You want to focus on them. You want to talk about how this is going to move the needle in some way, and be specific. You want to spark interest with the reader. And remember, this is all about funding, right? So you want to describe how the budgeted items are part of the project activities. Second common component is a budget. And the budget is usually composed of two pieces that work together, a spreadsheet and a narrative. The spreadsheet adds things up, which you all know what a spreadsheet is. A narrative is a story about your budget. Probably the most boring story you'll ever write, but that's what it is. So, the budget spreadsheet usually looks something like this. It's got categories, it's got a year one, maybe it has a year two, and then it has grand totals. This is just an example. Every agency, foundation, company uses something different. This is just an example, but every NOFO is going to want to know how you're going to spend your money, so they'll have something like this. All right, so the budget narrative explains the costs you've put in the spreadsheet. And when you're writing this story about your budget, you want to talk about how you arrived at the numbers you arrived at. You want to provide a justification for the numbers. You want to justify big costs. You know, if you've got something in there that's way, way bigger and maybe uses up most of the grant, you want to spend a little time on that. You want to be sure that everything in the program narrative is in your budget narrative. And you want to avoid explaining. A lot of people waste a lot of space talking about, I'm buying 100 pens, you know? They don't want to know that kind of stuff. So, your NOFO will give you all the instructions about the budget. And it's going to include things like a list of allowable and not allowable expenses. So, usually things like alcohol or prizes, I know, alcohol prizes are not allowable with public money. And it may mention things like cost share or matching. This means if the grant is giving you $1, you have to put $1 from your local funds into the project. That's a match. It may cap the indirect cost rate. We didn't talk about the indirect cost. We can if you want. It's a, let me go back a slide. So the indirect cost is usually just a percentage. In this example, it's 10%. It's a percentage of the total amount that is for the administration of the project. Again, I teach an 8-week class on this, so I'm just skimming over the top. If you have specific questions, we can stop. But it may also require that you attach bids. This is especially true for construction or technology projects. And after your application, your NOFO, your application package is submitted, you may get questions from the GPO asking you to explain. Yes?
So grants, you're basically saying that some may mention one-on-one or two-on-one, but it also can be no match back as well?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Every grant is different. And an agency may have multiple grant programs, and there may be different rules for each program. You really have to read the NOFO carefully. Really, really, really read it carefully. Okay, evaluations. So this is a Mad Libs that I've given you. It's a really easy way to help you write what your outcomes are for the project. So with every project, most funders want to know, so what? What's going to change? Yes. Yes.
Sorry.
No, it's really hard to see.
Yeah.
Just sing out.
Is it typical that nonprofits and for-profit like companies and organizations will apply for the same grant, or are grants for those like a non-for-profit and a for-profit, are they usually separated?
Yes. So I have seen grants that were available to both profit-driven or for-profit organizations and not-for-profit. Again, my experience is in the library world, and there are libraries that are within for-profit institutions, like in corporations, for example. There's a corporate library. They frequently apply for grants. So in my experience, yes, absolutely. If you can meet whatever criteria are in the NOFO, have to read the NOFO. If you can meet whatever those criteria are for applying, you're golden.
Do you usually see like a bias towards either way, or like a sway? Like in your experience, like if grant funders typically prefer not-for-profits or for-profits?
I come from the library world, so most of my experience is in the not-for-profit world. But I've never worked for an organization like the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation or, the Target Foundation or any of those. So I can't really answer that question, but I would presume most of the big federal grants are aimed at not-for-profits. That's been my experience. I may be wrong.
Okay, no, thank you so much.
Perhaps you can rephrase your question where it's more germane to what your interests are.
Yeah, well, it was more just, I work in like municipal government, so
Ah.
it's like,
So not-for-profit.
yeah. So trying to see if it sways one way or the other, if there's gonna be, if I should aim for, grants that are more, kinder, maybe more friendly towards like not-for-profits or.
There are grants for everything.
Right.
I mean, again, our world is changing as we speak here.
Yeah.
There are many grants for many different things, many different types of eligible organizations, so. All right, let's talk a little bit about outcomes and how you're going to evaluate the success of your project. Most funders are going to require you to tell them, how are you going to evaluate whether the money we've given you has done any good? How are you going to do that? And so I've given you this Mad Lib. So let's say the factory down the road has closed and you are interested in doing a resume writing workshop. Let's just use that as an example, okay? My project idea, my target audience is people who are recently unemployed because the factory down the road closed. My project should change this. They should gain skills in resume writing and job application. By how much? 80% of the people who attend our workshop should gain this knowledge. And how am I going to evaluate that? I'm going to do a survey. Maybe before they start, I'll survey them and I'll say, hey, how much do you know about writing a resume? And they may say, I don't know anything. And then after they finish the program, say, hey, how much do you know about writing a resume? And they say, I know what I need to know, thanks. So most projects are going to ask you for some sort of evaluation of how their money made a difference.
Question.
Yes?
What if that's unclear? How, like, I work with arts
Mm-hmm.
and music,
Mhm.
not-for-profit.
Mm-hmm.
I also work with UC Books to Prisoners. How would I measure an outcome of, say, sending a book to a prisoner or providing music for someone?
You could,
Thank you for that question.
you could ask them before you start, you know, what's your understanding of this topic? Or, you know, how do you feel about music or something like that? You could ask them that before your project starts. And then at the conclusion of the project, say, how do you feel? What has changed? Has the needle moved? I mean, none of this has to be, that's not true. For some grants, it does need to be rigorous.
Yeah.
But mostly in the kinds of grants that I've applied for, it's observation, it's survey, it's experience, where you're measuring their knowledge, skills, attitude, and behavior. You're asking them to tell you what the impact was. The target audience by them. Does that make sense?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah.
It still sounds difficult, but
It's very difficult.
Yeah, can we talk a little bit more about this? Cause I'm just like, okay, books to prisoners, who, I'm not seeing how we're getting there from your explanation. So, like,
Okay.
yeah, I mean,
Sure.
it's nebulous. I mean, he's providing a very necessary service.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, to me, it's duh, but obviously
To you,
can't.
it's duh,
Exactly,
but-
but it's not to the corporations who control the money. So, can you talk a little more about how you would write a successful grant to?
This is
For
just
this
a part of
gentleman?
the grant, okay?
Yeah.
This is just a part of the grant. This is just the evaluation, the outcome of the grant. And most funders will want you to do some kind of evaluation. This isn't the whole grant, okay?
All right,
And
so
they-
in his case, if he were to say, we gave out 800 books, and so 800 prisoners read 800 books, and, I mean, is that enough for a, literacy, just call it literacy improvement, something like that?
Might be.
Does that
Might be.
work?
Just saying I gave out 800, or the project distributed 800 books might be enough.
Okay.
I would be tempted to do something where I'm actually interviewing, observing, doing a survey of the people who received the books
Okay,
to know whether they've had some experience that enriched them, that changed them, that added to their knowledge somehow.
okay.
If those books made a difference, the so what? You gave them 800 books, so what? Yes,
Right, that helps, thank you.
sure.
Using their example,
Uh-huh.
using some kind of research in it, saying, this number of prisoners who had access to books during prison had this percentage rate of employment post-prison.
Absolutely,
Something like that.
absolutely. And some grant projects, this should make all of us feel better, I know it does me. Some grant projects hire outside evaluators because this piece of the project can be very difficult, very challenging, and it can be a lot of work inside the project, if that makes sense. All right, so just one more example outcome statement. All right, so using the Mad Libs on the previous screen, I've written this statement. 80% of the adults participating, that's 80 of the 100 total participants will gain confidence to search the database independently, finding information that they seek, attending 3 classes provided by the grant. So I have used that Mad Libs to sort of sculpt what I hope is going to happen as a result of this project. Helpful? Not helpful?
Yeah.
Okay. Yes, did you have a question? Was that helpful?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Component 4, the timeline. So, again, this is something that is asked for by many grant opportunities where maybe going down one axis, you'll have a list of the major activities. Going across the other axis, you'll have the years, the months, that kind of thing. And you're just going to think through which activities come first and how are they laid out against the calendar. This, my friends, is a wonderful planning tool. It helps you understand, okay, I am supposed to hire someone to work on this project, but I can't have the classes that I've said I'm going to have until I've hired that person. So it helps you understand the dependencies that you'll have in the project. What is dependent on what happening and in which order. Make sense? Great tool. Love doing this. It really, really clarifies things. For me, at least. Yeah?
What are the color codes in the previous slide?
So it would be easier for you to track across the rows. So activity 1 is in that olive color, activity 2 is orange, activity 3 is purple.
Okay.
I just color coded it so you could see it better.
And what is unsplash? Sorry,
Unsplash, where did I have Unsplash?
one of the.
It's a website where you can download rights, where the photographers have given rights with acknowledgement to use their photographs.
Oh, and anybody can use it?
Yeah,
or it is,
Unsplash. Yep,
Thank you.
you're welcome. Yeah, here's an Unsplash. All right, let's quickly talk about the funder's point of view. Why are we talking about the funder? You, as an applicant, want to understand what they want, what they're thinking, how they award their money, what they want to get out of their grants. So, when you go to them and you say, I don't like your NOFO, change it, if it's been published already, it is carved in stone because they want to be consistent. They want to be sure that their practices are fair. And if the NOFO is already out there, they can't change it because that wouldn't be fair to everybody else. It's also not a popularity contest. You know, they want to fund the best projects. They want to be funding the things that matter to them. In the case of the federal and state government, they want to fund the things that they're statutorily mandated to do. And many different factors weigh in the decisions about which grants to fund. They may need to fund grants in all the regions of the state, and maybe yours was wonderful, but they already had one funded in that region. So they didn't get to yours, they ran out of money before they did. And it is possible, if you've had a grant before and you have an excellent record of grant management, that can also be a mark in your favor. It can also, if you have not managed a grant well, you can be on a no fund list. So you want to be sure that you are managing a grant, if you get one, in the manner that is prescribed by the funder. And again, look at their websites.
What's
So,
Would a do not fund list, would that be public in any way?
You might get a letter about it
Okay.
that says, hey, you haven't turned in your annual reports, your quarterly reports, you're not gonna be eligible to apply for a grant for the next year, you know. So you wanna be sure you do what you say you're gonna do and what the NOFO and the requirements are listed in the award agreement. Okay, very important. Don't blow that stuff off, ever. Okay, so the GPO, they want your project to succeed. They want a grant they can brag about. And remember, they have written the NOFO, most likely. They're the ones who actually wrote it, and they can help you decide which category to apply in if they have multiple offerings. And maybe your grant isn't such a good fit. I have had many calls with many different grant program officers where they've said, our offerings are not fitting what you're telling me. So, you know, maybe you look for a different NOFO, maybe you wait a couple years, but they can help you. Read the NOFO. I think I've said that before. Read the NOFO, get your highlighter out, be thorough in your reading. Some of the GPOs will let you send them a draft and they'll comment on it, some of them won't. And some of the programs will allow you to have a call, a conversation before you submit the final thing. And if you do have that luxury, because it is a luxury, you know, listen to what they have to say and do the things they tell you to do on your draft. There's an article I included here about what to say and not to say to program officers. This, of course, nobody submits grants in paper anymore. But when I was at the state library, this was one of our grant opportunities. These are applications. So this just visually makes the point that many, many opportunities are very competitive. So what do you want to do? Because remember, this is a contest, right? You want to make sure that your grant is easy for the reviewers to score and to understand. That is your number one job, that you've included all the pieces, you've followed the instructions, and that they can give it an absolutely perfect score, right? Right, okay. So, one thing I want to point out to you, I know there's a lot here, and I'm running out of time, but one thing I want to point out to you is to write your proposal like nobody has ever worked in your kind of organization again, or ever. I think when we're writing, we tend not to explain our own context. You know, we don't have a sense of, hey, Larry at the grant place, he's not gonna know how I work, where I work, what's going on. He's not gonna know any of that. So, you know, kind of get your head up a little bit and think about, okay, I need to tell the reviewers about my context, all right? Okay, if your application's funded, you are gonna be the best awardee they've ever had. You're gonna turn in all your reports, you're gonna let them know about any problems you have, you're going to be the project they can brag about. You're sending pictures, you're in touch with your GPO all the time, and here's a little tip, audits are common and to be expected in grant programs. I always, whenever I have a conversation with a program officer, I have it in email. I document what I've said and their responses. Keep meticulous records and only allowable expenses. So having said all that, guys, budget amendments are very common You know, you get into a project and something costs way less than you got the bid for, or it costs way more, and you have to move money around one way or the other. Happens all the time. Don't worry about it, but you do need to be in touch with your GPO about the changes. Sometimes they have to approve if you're changing one kind of expense into another. Yeah?
What is no fund list?
The no fund list is what we were talking about before, where an organization, a grant-giving organization, maybe you didn't turn in your quarterly reports or your annual reports, you had expenditures that were not allowable, and you did nothing to rectify the situation. A no fund list would be you're not eligible to apply for a grant for the next year. And you'd get a letter and it would say, hey, you didn't turn in your reports, you had these expenses, you're on a no fund list. Okay. But you'd never do that. Right. Okay. If your application's not funded, don't take it personally. Nobody gets everything they apply for. It happens, right? You just apply for the next thing. Talk to your program officer. Why was it denied? What was the reason for not funding this grant? And more importantly, can you fix it and submit it in the next round? Was it, worthy? Was the idea worthy? I just kind of didn't get my point across. This has happened to me many, many times, where I didn't get the grant. I talked to the program officer and I said, hey, can I rewrite this? What do you think? And they'll talk to you about it, and you get, with most grant programs, you get the reviewer's comments. They're anonymous. I mean, you don't know who said the things, but you get the reviewer's comments and you can read through them and, make some of the changes they recommend. Keep writing though. And here's an article that I found on 4 questions to ask after a rejection. Okay, again, you can get these slides. So, my girl, Julia, I love her. So Julia said something to the effect of, nobody's born a great chef. It's all about practice. Oh, she's so wonderful. So I equate writing a grant to following a recipe. You figure out what you want to do. What's the occasion? You assemble your quality ingredients. This could be people or research, whatever. You read and reread the NOFO, the recipe, before you even start. You assemble your team of experts. Maybe that's the people who help you write it, who read it. Maybe it's money people, whoever. You follow the steps in order. This is not a free writing experience. This is a write in this way, in this order experience, okay? Your presentation counts, just like Julia always said. You want to make it look nice. You want to be sure you've spelled everything correctly, that you've followed the margins and the typeface and all that good stuff. And of course, practice, practice, practice. So, in a nutshell, you have an idea, you do your research, you assemble your team, you do lots of planning, and you've set up your budget and timeline. That, in a nutshell, is your grant application. Most common mistakes. So, again, I spent a long time with grants. What can I say? So on this side are the mistakes. On this side are the things that I would recommend not to make those mistakes. I won't read all of these. We've talked about some of them, but I'll leave it on the screen for a few seconds here. What questions do you have right now? Yes,
Actually, I have two. So if you don't use everything in the grant, do you send it back or?
so most funders do not want money back. If you are at a situation where the end of your grant period is coming up and you haven't spent the entire award, you need to be on the phone with the program officer and say, hi, I have funding that has not been fully expended. Can I negotiate with you so that I can fully expend this award? And they will help you, most likely will help you find a way that fits within your project to fully expend. Not every agency is like that, but most do not want the money back, okay? Most, not all. Yes?
I have a question about the narrative part of the
Yes.
grant, in terms of writing style. So are you supposed to be making that like emotional, introducing yourself, sharing stories about your organization, or is it more like stating facts and like here's what our mission is and more professional? Like, or is there kind of a balance of the two?
So let me take 2 steps back.
Sure.
Okay, 2 steps back. The NOFO is going to tell you specifically what you need to include in the narrative. Okay, it's going to say you need a statement of need, you need a project plan, you need a project staff. It's going to tell you the sections that you need to write. Okay, it's going to say all of that in the NOFO. So within those sections, you want to write something that the reviewers remember and that really hooks them and says, that is a project worth funding, okay? So you want to pepper the facts, the research, if you have it. Not all grants are going to have research. Not all grants are going to have a lot of, hard data behind them, okay? But if you have it, you're going to pepper that with anecdotes. Not overly emotional, but true stories. Nothing untrue. True stories. Pepper it. Modestly, okay? The other thing you want to do is put a little distance between yourself and the application. You don't want to make it I, we, our. You want to say the organization, If I were writing a grant for the Champaign Public Library, I would say the Champaign Public Library seeks to do da-da-da-da-da-da-da. I would not say we. You want to put a professional veneer on that application, okay? So your narrative is going to be, you'll have a page limit. Maybe it's 2 pages, maybe it's 10 pages, maybe it's 60 pages. But you'll all of this is generalities, and any of these NOFOs could be different, okay? So you'll usually have a page limit, and you'll have to stick to that page limit for the narrative, okay? Does that help?
Yeah, it does.
Okay. Did you have a question, sir, in the back? No? Okay.
The 8-week class that you teach, is that public or is that like a private class?
It is for students in the Masters of Library Science program who are in that program.
Okay.
Yes?
Can an individual apply for grants in certain organizations, or do you have to be a business of some sort?
There are so many grants in the world. There are grants for individuals. There are grants for doing things like studying abroad, or enhancing your your educational portfolio. I mean, there are all kinds of grants for individuals. There are so many different kinds of grants, and each one of them has different requirements, okay? So Lauren can help you find an appropriate NOFO for whatever it is you want to do. okay? There's probably a grant out there. I'm a librarian. My slice of the world is libraries. What I know from having worked with many, mostly public organizations. So, does that answer?
Yes.
Yeah, yes.
So, not to ask you a depressing question, but with the closing of the IMLS going on, are there state cognates to IMLS?
What's a state cognate?
Well, you know, because IMLS is a national organization.
Yes.
Does the state of Illinois have something similar?
Oh,
Does the
okay.
state of Missouri have the same thing, but, you know, obviously
Right,
smaller
okay.
scale?
So, the Institute of Museum and Library Services, the federal agency that's devoted to funding for museums and libraries in the United States that reports directly to the President of the United States, is being shuttered. So, in Illinois, we do have the Illinois Secretary of State's office. The Secretary of State in this state is also the state librarian. And the state librarian administers grants for all types of libraries, grants that are funded with state appropriations. So that's the thing in Illinois.
Okay.
But
Every state's gonna be a different story, but.
every state is a different story. Many states do not have state-based grants for libraries.
Yay for living in Illinois.
We are a good library state.
She actually had her hand up first.
This is for mainly nonprofit, right?
I'm sorry?
Nonprofit organizations.
These are tips for writing grants. And I would bet my bottom dollar that you could commute these tips into writing a grant for a for-profit organization. They are, any grantor is still gonna wanna see you follow the NOFO. They're gonna wanna see you spend the money in the way they told you to spend it. And they're gonna want you to be filing reports on time. And I mean, I think pretty much everything I've said can be commuted to a for-profit world.
It'll probably say like, who is eligible, like if somebody is.
Who's eligible?
Yeah.
Each grant is different. So you really have to look at the grant. You really do. There are many grants out there.
Sorry, dumb questions.
No, not not at all, not at all. Yes.
Okay, so my question might be unpopular, right? Because I know you were as a librarian, but now that AI is becoming big,
Mm-hmm.
is that something that we should be avoiding as using AI? Do they look down or frown upon those kinds of things when you're writing your grant?
I have no idea. I really don't.
You've not heard of
I
it
would
yet?
not use AI to write a grant, but.
I just heard somebody today talking about they used it, so I don't know.
Well, a lot of people use AI. I think that if you're writing a grant, you need to, write it from here.
Okay.
And maybe AI can help you neaten around the edges, but the substance of it is gonna have to come from you.
Okay.
So, no dumb questions, really. None. Yeah. Do you have another one? No? Okay. Anybody? Yes.
I think you talked a bit about, if you're getting sort of agreement with your organization. What if that's a little bit of a challenge? What if not everybody is on board for you writing a grant?
Well, that is tough. And sometimes, you really have to think about it if that's not the case. It may not be the right time for the organization, or they may have other things going on and they wanna be sure those are the priority. I don't know. But that's a tough call. I think you have to use your judgment. I would want my organization to be my biggest cheerleader.
Yeah.
If you can't achieve that, you'll have to, make the decision. Do I go forward? Do I not go forward? And are the reasons for them not being my cheerleader, do they make sense? Do they resonate?
Mm-hmm.
But, if you get the grant, you want them to make space for it.
Yeah,
So it's really difficult not to have them in your corner.
right. Thank you.
And they'll need to be the fiscal officer likely,
Yeah.
so, fiscal agent likely, so.
Can you explain exactly what that term fiscal agent means?
Yes, so each grant is, when you get a grant from an organization, from a grant giver, they'll likely, again, everything's different all the time, everywhere, but likely they will send you something that is essentially a contract
Yeah.
that they sign and you sign. And when you sign it, you have agreed to a certain set of regulations, a certain set of things you're gonna do, not do, etc. It's a contract, and your application becomes part of that agreement, right?
Uh-huh.
So the fiscal agent is whoever is handling the money. Is it your parent organization? Is it a friends group? Or I know, I'm in the library world, but is it an affiliated group? That kind of thing. So who is it that's handling the money?
Okay.
I have taken too much time, I really have. And Lauren, I'm sorry, come up, please. I'll take your question while she's coming up, because I'm way over
It might
time.
be for Lauren.
Excellent.
How do we get your slides that I believe you said you'd share?
So back in, I have a list back here, that you can put your email address on there. and
Okay.
just put there's a box where you can.
Okay, I'm sorry, I just read that, I just wasn't wrong. Thank you.
I'm so sorry,
No,
Lauren.
why are you apologizing? This is
Because
amazing content.
you have great stuff to share.
Okay, so let's go ahead. So, and I am gonna talk about nonprofit grants. We will talk about business grants too, because I know probably people will also hear from small businesses. Oh, I turned it on, did I not? Okay. That's on. Okay, great. Okay, so I'm not gonna go through this whole presentation as the presentation I gave recently about nonprofit resources here at the library, but I will also touch on for-profit businesses as well. But the big thing that we have here is something called Candid. Now, Candid includes Foundation Directory, which is a grant database where you can look up grants. And actually, it's not necessarily grants that are open to be applied for right immediately, but there are grants that have been received by organizations in recent years. And in most cases, although as Anne has pointed out, things are changing in the world right now, and a lot of these grants are available year to year. So you can expect certain foundations to have the same grant in 2025 that they had in 2024, sometimes, not always. But also part of Candid, we have something called GuideStar. If you are a nonprofit organization, I do recommend creating a GuideStar profile, because a lot of nonprofit granting is the granting agency being able to trust your organization. And a lot of that is having that profile. They can look up your organization, see the work that you're doing in the community, because it's about that relationship building and that trust. Also part of Candid is something called Philanthropy News Digest. I think you mentioned that one. That's a pretty good resource for looking at some current grant opportunities that are kind of nationwide. It's not great as far as locating ones that maybe are specific to Champaign County, but it is good if, for kind of larger national grants. And it has something called Candid Learning, which is trainings that they have for nonprofit leaders on fundraising, on grant writing, things like that. So Candid is something that we have access here at the library. You can use it here at the library. Unfortunately, it's one of the few databases we have that has to be used in-house. A lot of our other databases you can use from home with the Champaign Public Library card. But I really wanted to talk about Foundation Directory. This is the one that I meet with people a lot. They will come in from a nonprofit organization looking for grants for specific funding. purposes. So Foundation Directory is basically a comprehensive database with detailed information about 150,000 or plus grant makers, including what kind of projects they fund, who works at these organizations, contact information for them, sometimes website information, which is great if you can find a website. But it allows you to search for grants that have been received in recent years based on subject matter, based on location. You can look for specific granting organizations. Actually, my favorite part is I like to look up other nonprofits and the grants that they've received, especially because I used to work for Habitat for Humanity here locally. So I was always like nosy, like, when's that other organization getting for grants? So that was a kind of nice tool, because especially if you know there's another nonprofit in the community that's kind of doing the same work you are, it kind of helps. Now I can kind of see what funding they're getting. So what I'm going to do with Foundation Directory is, and actually a couple of things I want to point before I jump into Foundation Directory, things that Ann mentioned. I always recommend starting early. I get a lot of people who come who are like, I'm filling out this grant, this like federal grant or the state grant, and it's due in 5 days. And I'm like, you do understand this, it's gonna take about 2 to 3 months sometimes for some of these large grants. I would say smaller foundations, not nearly as long. I used to apply for ones for Habitat, maybe a week. But these state grants in particular, they have a lot of requirements and you need to leave yourself time. So I do not recommend coming to me 3 days before a grant is due and saying, hey, can you help me apply for this? Because I will probably say no. So also be very specific with what you're putting in the grant application, making sure also that you're looking for grants that fit your organization's mission and what they're doing. So don't pursue grants for animal welfare when you're working in like affordable housing, because you're wasting your time. You are not going to get that funding. There's no way. Always read the grant makers guidelines, as Ann mentioned. Customize, your application. Sometimes for some of these smaller foundation grants, you don't have to reinvent the wheel every single time. I used to have like a grant folder where I would put grants I've received in the past, and some of those can be tailored to whatever grant you're applying for. But as Ann said, you always want to read specifically what they're asking for and the directions there. And also always following up if you get the grant, or following up if you don't get the grant. So what I want to do actually, let's pop into the Foundation Directory real fast so I can kind of show you guys how you use it. And if you're wondering how to get there, let's actually start there. So on our website, champaign.org, this is what our website looks like. You've never been here before. You can get to Foundation Directory 2 ways. You can get through the e-library tab at the top, and then under online tools, or you can come right to the business career tab at the top. So that's kind of where I'm gonna go. Because that kind of shortcuts you there, and then just pop over to business services, click on that, and then we should have a list now of all of our business tools. And I probably won't have time to go over all these other ones, but if you're ever interested in knowing more about our other databases that we have, and a lot of these actually are very helpful for grant writing too, especially if you need facts and figures about the community. Maybe you need some demographic information for your grant application. You can use a lot of these databases for that. But I'm going to pop into Foundation Directory Online and just click on it. Now you can use this here at the library on your own computer as long as you're on our Wi-Fi network. You can also sit down on one of our public computers upstairs and use it as well. Okay, so this is what Foundation Directory looks like. So now it's just gonna say, what are you looking for? I always recommend just going right straight to advanced search, because that way I can search for whatever subject area I'm looking for a grant in. I also often like to kind of put a geographic focus. I find that a lot of grants in here, they're like, funds must be used in Missouri, or funds must be used in California. So I kind of want to go ahead and maybe start by looking at Champaign County, Illinois. If you find you're not getting enough grants coming up with that narrow of a geographic focus, you can switch it to Illinois. You can also look at Central Illinois. There's various things. I was meeting with someone the other day. We looked at like Champaign County, Piatt County, Douglas County, because the nonprofit they worked for kind of served all those areas. So I'm going to go ahead and put in, Champaign County, Illinois for my geographic focus. And I'm just going to use this example because this is something that last week I met with someone who who was looking for grants for an organization that worked with individuals with developmental disabilities. So I'm just gonna pick on them, but that's what we were looking for. So I'm gonna put in those. You can also put in more specific things about population served, if maybe you're working specifically with youth or the elderly. If you have any other details really for a specific grant maker or specific organization, you can also search for those. I'm gonna include US federal funders too. And it does give you grants to individuals. I just think someone did mention that. That does not come up as much, unfortunately, in here, but you could always search for that as well. I think that might be more for like humanities grants, arts grants, things like that. But I'm gonna go ahead now and do a search. And now it's gonna give me now a bunch of information. It's gonna give me grant makers, grants themselves, people who've received these grants, and then these 990 tax forms, which are these forms that grant funders or foundations, they have to file every year declaring what their assets are. Usually I'll start with the grant makers, and now I can look at a list of 24 grant makers who have recently funded grants for developmental disability organizations with funding being used in Champaign County. So now I can scroll through, I can see, now I can look at their assets, how much they funded. I can also look at the specific grants they've given out. But now I'm just kind of doing research, because a lot of grant work is doing research. It's just looking to see who's out there with money. You know, what are they looking for? How do you apply for it? And I mean, I know when I was a nonprofit, that was kind of like the biggest thing for me, was just knowing who's out there. And once you know, then I would take that information, put it on a spreadsheet, and keep that information, check it every year. But for example, so sometimes you'll run into foundations, small foundations. So I'll click on it. It's not big enough that they have a website, unfortunately, but I'll scroll down and I'll look and I'll see, you know, okay, they gave every year $1,000 to this, to DSC. And I'll scroll down and look at their funding interest, their geographic focus. What I'm probably now looking for is who's at this organization. They don't have a website, so that's not gonna give me too much help, but it does give me some names. I can also get an address. So with one of these like smaller local foundations, what I always recommend, and I know at Habitat, it doesn't hurt to send them a letter. Maybe send them like a mailer. Maybe send them an impact statement, something about your organization. I know, for example, when I was at Habitat, they donated to the Rainey Foundation every year, or Rainey Foundation donated to Habitat every year because they knew them. But a lot of it is kind of like establishing that relationship with that foundation, that granting officer. So unfortunately, this organization is not big enough, or maybe they don't want their information public, or they don't have a website. But at least I can get an address, I can get names of individuals. So now I might do some work to see maybe who else has gotten grants for them locally. I'll probably send them a piece of mail with some information about my organization. But so some of these, that's with the smaller foundation. But now I'm gonna keep on looking. I remember when I was looking through here with this woman last week, we found this Wheeler Foundation. I never heard of this one. So they actually have a website, which is nice. So I was able to click on here, and I learned about this organization that is not far from here. They're actually in Central Illinois, and they give out grants to people with developmental disabilities, and you can actually apply right online. And I was like, amazing. So this way, exactly perfect. So this was one of the foundations that that this woman was like, oh, I'm totally gonna apply to this grant. But this is what Foundation Directory is good for, is kind of learning about organizations that are funding projects in whatever geographic focus you're looking at, who's who at the organization, I mean, whatever you're looking for. You can also look up 990 forms on here, so if I wanted, which is kind of interesting, so if I wanted to learn more about other organizations they're funding, how much they have in assets, you can click on their 990. But another thing that I like about Foundation Directory I mentioned is using it to kind of snoop on like what are other like nonprofits getting for funding. So if I'm working with developmental disabilities, I probably want to know what DSC is getting for grants. So I'm going to go ahead and click on them, and now I can see how much money they're getting, where their grants are coming from, and now I can start going through everybody who's given them a grant in recent years. I'm going to probably go ahead and pursue these foundations as well, because I know that we're giving to organizations that work with individuals' developmental disabilities. So yeah, but this is Foundation Directory in a nutshell. It's a lot of doing research, looking who's out there. I highly recommend putting together a spreadsheet once you find an organization, especially if you can get a website or contact information, put it on your spreadsheet. And then check back, go online, see maybe they've opened up a grant window that you're not aware of. I always recommend sending out mailers. You never know who's out there. I mean, I literally sent a mailer to a couple who had a foundation locally, not expecting much, but they gave us $300,000 just through a mailer. Because they were a local foundation, they were just a couple who had money that they had to give away by the end of the year. Just turned out they happened to fund the kind of project that I was trying to get funded. So it's like you never know unless you just put yourself out there kind of thing. So I especially do recommend, if you have the capacity, to still don't shy away too much from mail, like printed mail. I know that like online giving and all the online stuff is very popular, but a lot of the organizations and people with money, a little bit older perhaps, and they do respond to printed mail. And especially if you send them something that shows what you're doing and the impact that you have locally in the community, it definitely makes a difference. So I'm always happy to sit down, and in the interest of time, I do want to go over some other grant options for people locally, but if you want to come in and sit down, book an appointment with me, we can go through Foundation Directory, we can go through other resources too. But yeah, I met with someone last week where she was like, I just need to pull a list of foundations funding this certain thing here locally, and I was like, sure. And we spent an hour, we came up with a list of about 20 foundations that were, gonna probably be good, good resources for her, and so then we just printed out the list, and I was like, there you go. But you're also welcome to come here to the library and use it anytime. I can help you if you get stuck, if you're not finding funders. I'm always happy to help you with that. But I do want to go back quickly to some other options I wanted to mention for grant seeking locally, because, locally and in this state. Because I know right now things are kind of hairy with the funding. Who knows what's going on with like federal level funding. So this might be the good time to really kind of like dig in and explore like more local options for funding. Just some stuff about GuideStar. And I can share these slides if you want to learn more about other resources we have here at the Champaign Public Library, like for market research, donor prospecting. You can look at people who donated, who are donating to nonprofits, get their mailing addresses. Gale Business Plan Builder is great if you're having to write a business grant, because you often have to include a business plan, and a lot of people don't have a business plan, so this is a good resource for that. We have Gale courses too, if you're not able to take Anne's amazing 8-week class on grant writing. There actually are some online classes you can take through Gale courses on grant writing. So I do recommend that too, and you can do these online from home with a Champaign Public Library card. But I do want to go over some of the specific ones here. These are some organizations that when I worked at Habitat, I got grants from all of these organizations. Most of these are local, or at least in the state of Illinois. I do recommend putting them on your radar if you're not already connected with them, if you're a nonprofit. So Community Foundation of East Central Illinois, they have 2 grant cycles a year: capacity building grant, community commitment grant. If you're a nonprofit, you're not connected with them, you really need to. I mean, I'm sure a lot of you are already, but bookmark their website, just check them out, see when their grants are open. Usually it's August and May. Ameren, Illinois actually has an Ameren Cares program locally that any nonprofit can apply for. Now they do caution you, they do have certain like focus areas they fund: arts and culture, civic and community, environment, health and human services, youth and education. Now those are pretty broad. So I mean, I think pretty much any nonprofit would probably be able to qualify under one of those categories. But yeah, I usually got about, I was getting about 2 grants a year from them with Habitat. And you just have to be living in Illinois or Missouri. You have to be in like one of their focus states, I guess, or so you can apply through their website. I mean, it's not a bad grant. It does ask for a budget, it does ask for a cover letter, various things, but it's not a bad grant to apply for. United Way of Champaign County, definitely connect with them if you're a nonprofit. I will say a lot of their grants are by invitation only. That's why I do recommend getting connected with them. You can actually sign up via their website to get notifications of granting opportunities. But at least you have to be on their radar. When I was at Habitat, I would get emails from them maybe 4 or 5 times a year saying, we have these funds available, apply. Usually when they said that meant we were gonna get some sort of money. So I do recommend getting connected with them. Don't sleep on your local Rotary clubs. I'm gonna mention just Champaign because I'm aware, I used to be a member of Champaign Rotary. They've got 2 grants a year, a Cannon grant and a Clark grant. One's a rolling grant where it's up to $5,000. I got tools for Habitat for Humanity with that. Cannon grants up to $20,000. I was able to get a pickup truck with that. You do have to know a Rotarian though in Champaign Rotary. They have to sponsor it. But there's like 200 to 300 people in Champaign Rotary locally, so you probably know someone in Champaign Rotary. And by sponsor, they just have to put their name on it, but they don't really do anything. The grant application, you fill it out yourself. But I'm sure, there's probably about 6 different Rotary clubs in this area at least. So I do recommend, they probably all have grant opportunities. Jeanette, do you have a question?
I honestly don't know, is the Rotary Club like the Elks and I have no idea what the Rotary Club is.
They're a service organization. They're about volunteerism in the
Okay.
community. It's mostly retired individuals, a way to socialize, but also to give back to the community. Most of them are very well connected. A lot of them have money. But there's, depending on, there's Champaign Rotary, Champaign West, or Urbana, CU Sunrise. There's a million of them. Muhammad Rotary. But I don't know what those other ones have for grants necessarily, but I know Champaign's the largest, and they definitely have a foundation, and they definitely give out grants. So they're definitely one you want to check into. Office of the Treasurer Charitable Trust. This is one that I found out about kind of recently, and I kind of like. This is actually funded, so it's Mike Frericks, Treasurer of Illinois. Anytime you incorporate your nonprofit, you pay a fee, and apparently they take those fees and they give them out as grants, which I didn't know until somewhat recently, and I was like, I love this idea. So it's like nonprofits supporting other nonprofits. But they have grants available twice a year. Typically they're in focus areas of housing, workforce and economic development, and food insecurity, but it just depends. It varies year to year. So I do recommend checking out their website. Those are for up to $20,000. And then the Illinois Department of Human Services, these are more for organizations dealing with like health and welfare, mental wellness, rehab, various things, homeless services. But these you can all find on the IDHS website. I don't know how this will be affected with everything going on right now. Who knows? But there are a lot of grant opportunities on there. So I do recommend bookmarking and checking frequently. So that's just kind of a rundown for nonprofits. Okay, for small business. So Ann mentioned DCEO, the Illinois Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunity does the bulk of the small business grants here locally. They just had one that I think literally April 7th was the deadline for that. I will warn you though that most of these are going to be pretty comprehensive grants. These require business plans. These require you have to create an account on something called sam.gov, which is like the System of Award Management. You have to get approved through there. That takes like 10 business days as it is alone to get in there. But once you get approved, then you're in the system and you can apply for these grants. But these will be for, business, entrepreneurship, various things, community development, tourism. They have new opportunities all the time. So I do recommend checking the website occasionally. One thing I will caution though, like a lot of them will be like reimbursement grants or matching grants where you have to put up the money up front and you get reimbursed. But I will say a lot of these grants, they do give you a lot of training and education on them, so you don't go into it blindly. They will have workshops and videos you can watch on how to apply. City of Champaign, they just had a small business grant recently for new and existing businesses. It was pretty competitive. That was about up to $20,000. I do know they intend on doing this year to year. They hope to do that. City of Urbana, same thing. It just depends on the funding they get from the state. Generally, it's a thing where I recommend checking their website. They usually make an announcement when they have grant money available. They often will also have other programs available, like Urbana's got a small business signage grant going on right now. They'll have some tax incentive programs, you know, TIF and enterprise district, depending. With the Small Business Development Center and you're a small business, I do recommend getting connected. The reason being is that when funding becomes available, Madeline at the SBDC will let you know. She will send you an email, she'll be like, you probably should really apply for this funding. Like, she really does keep on top of that, and she knows who her clients are. She will give you information about it, she will encourage you to apply. But I also want to mention they do have some programs available to SBDC clients that are amazing. Right now they have one with Anna Longworth Singer where you can get all sorts of photography for your business. So if you're, especially if you're in a retail business, this is an amazing resource. You're getting like, you know, thousands of dollars worth of professional photography for free for your online store, for your website, whatever. And then they're also doing a brand refresh, I think, with Scott Clannon and Clannon Creative, where he's like, let's recreate your logo, let's do your website. I know Jeanette got one of those things,
Oh,
and
heck
it was
yeah.
amazing. Like, just they created her own logo and like the whole like just brand suite. It was
it's not just the logo, but it's like the whole, the color palette.
Everything.
And everything, yeah.
So good. I mean, so many businesses don't have a brand suite, they don't have a logo and things like that, things you should have. So if you become a client of the SBDC, then you can apply for these programs that they have. So I do recommend that. I also want to point out quickly arts and humanities grants, because I do get questions about these too. But these you can get through different sources. Illinois Humanities, they do actually have some funding available right now for all sorts of different things. There's one called the Living History Grant. So if you're a historian and you want to talk about, you know, get together like a history of Champaign and, you know, do a presentation on it, you get funding for that. Illinois Arts Council, those both give money to arts organizations, but also to individuals. Illinois Humanities is a little more for organizations, while that Living History Grant is for individuals. Urbana Arts and Culture Grant, that one just ended, unfortunately. The deadline was, I think, in March. But every year they have funding for people who want to do art in Urbana and public spaces. And then 40 North is serves Champaign County and the arts community. They have grants every year, but they also have a call to artists on there where people are looking for, you know, art projects and artists to do art locally. So yeah, so these are just, I mean, there's more out there. These are ones that I have had personal experience with in recent years, and also they're a little more locally based. So I feel a little more confident about some of them being in existence right now. I know it's about 7:30, and I'm always happy to meet about any of these things for business, for nonprofit. I mean, for anything. Does anybody have any questions? I know it was kind of cramming in a lot in a short period of time, but, or any questions? Oh yeah, go ahead.
I just have a comment. This was excellent. Thank you.
Yes. Oh, thank you. Does anybody have any questions for Ann too about anything? Yes.
Just a really quick question, you don't have to elaborate too much, but do you find grant awards tying in much with like capital campaigns? Is there a marriage there, or it typically seems two different?
Well, DCEO, the one are you with a small business or with a nonprofit?
Nonprofit.
Okay. I mean, with a nonprofit, sometimes they're unrestricted. You can use it for whatever you want. You know, I mean, it will always specify in the grant application. I find that a lot of the like individual foundations, like the couples with money and stuff like that, they don't usually put strings on it. They're like, whatever you want to use it for, we trust your organization. The one that I got for Habitat was actually for a capital campaign that I sent out. We were moving to a new location, but I think they just happened to like funding building projects. But yeah, I'm trying to think what other ones. It just depends. Like I know the ones for community foundation, those are usually tied to capacity building more than, so like you need to hire, you want to maybe upgrade your office, get new computers, or with Habitat it was like getting new tools, things like that. So that wouldn't necessarily be a capital campaign one. It just depends. It'll usually specify in the RFP or the application what you can use the funds for. But I find that a lot of foundations, it'll often be unrestricted.
Thank you.
And I just asked about small business, because the DCEO one they just had recently was actually for capital expenses specifically. It was like buying a new building, getting new equipment, stuff like that, but it stated that in the application. Any other questions? And I will say one last thing, so if you're a new nonprofit, it can be really hard to get grants the first year or so, because you need to have that kind of history of doing work in the community. But don't let that discourage you from applying, because it is great practice. And it also helps build that relationship with the granting officer and that trust that you need when you're applying for grants.
And no one gets everything they apply for.
That is also true. Yeah.
But you have to keep doing it.
Jeanette.
Speaking of grants and that kind of stuff, I don't know if you remember, Lauren, you helped me with a grant application last, God knows, it was probably October, November.
Yeah, did you get it?
I just got a $10,000 grant from the Illinois for the Creative Accelerator Fund.
Awesome.
So it was like you've
See?
done all the steps.
I remember working with you on that.
And we worked,
Yeah.
and it's like I had to make the narrative, we had to have the whole video. So my video was in costume at Allerton, and I mean, check all the boxes as you held me through, and I think you held my hand like 3 or 4 times before I put it in.
Yeah.
And the grant officer actually had to call me on the phone because I kept getting these letters that looked like spam in my email inbox, and it was very vague. And it was like, oh, your letter, and it was like, yeah, right, I got all kinds of spam in there, and I didn't realize that was an honest-to-God grant proposal, and so she had to call me, chase me down, but she did.
Well, thank God she called you.
Yeah. So, I got money coming in for my research on colonial bends.
Well, congratulations. I know you worked really hard on that.
Yeah, I worked hard on it, and so did you. So kudos to having a really good business librarian. This is a resource a lot of libraries don't have. So you're a godsend.
I'm going to share that with her team. That's okay.
As you should.
Great. Any other questions or anything? But yeah, my cards are back there. Like I said, get on the email list. You don't want to know about upcoming business and nonprofit workshops. Hoping to have Ann back again next year, because you're just great at what you do.
Oh.
Yeah. Yeah.
We make a good team.
Yes, definitely.